I'm joined today by Laura. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma.
Very good to be here with you. Before we get into some of our broader topics, be great to understand, Laura, a bit about your career journey and how you came to be where you are today. So kind of take me back, talk me through it.
Sure, absolutely. I started my career in marketing and comms in medium-sized businesses. And quite early on, I was reporting directly to managing directors, CEOs, founders. And I actually didn't realize at the time how formative that will be. I guess because I wasn't in large marketing departments, I was mainly on my own. So I didn't have layers of senior marketers above me. So instead, I was sitting at that leadership table, hearing commercial conversations about revenue pressures, cash flows, margins, operational challenges. So you can imagine, being a grad out of uni, that was like way over my head. But I didn't know at the time that exposure gave me that strong commercial acumen today, and probably earlier in the career as well. So I guess the upside was that I learned how business actually makes money. Right? And ultimately, even if you're part of the marketing department or HR or wherever you may be, the business obviously has one aim is to make money.
Yeah.
The downside to that, I guess, was that I had to proactively seek out my marketing development because I'd had it from a managing director as a commercially valued, but not so much, in marketing skill set or technically marketing. So I didn't always have those senior marketing mentors internally. So that probably was that little downside. And I guess to teach me that strategic thinking or the brand capability. So I had to really look elsewhere. I had to look outside of this box. So externally, courses, professional associations, and then eventually later in my career, executive coaching. Over time, I moved more into senior roles, obviously, and especially more recently before I started my own business. And there, in those senior roles, I wasn't executing campaigns anymore. I was actually shaping the strategy. I was aligning marketing with business goals. I was influencing at executive level. And I guess that earlier career of being sitting on that executive table, what probably did help me out later on. And I guess, sometimes early on in the career, you look at some CEOs and managing directors, and you think, oh, wow, but they're all humans at the end of the day. We are all human. And if you have that relationship at that human level, I think it just works out. And I think that's where it helped me later on. But I guess it came a point in time where in my last corporate role where I realized I wanted more. So I wanted more of a broader impact. I wanted different things. I wanted to shape commercial strategy. I didn't want to just operate with an existing structure. And I could see that this particular role, my last role, didn't go where I wanted to go. So I needed to find something else. And I guess I always had this quiet ambition that I wanted to have my own business. So and funny enough, when I was working with my executive coach right at the start, I wanted my first thing was I wanted to have my own business. My first thing that I said to her, and I had forgotten that over time that I worked with her over 2 or 3 years. And so when I did open my own business, she said, "Well, do you remember what you said to me?" I was
So
like, "Yes,
lovely.
I did." And then I found growth late marketing. I didn't want to wonder what if. So that's where I started my journey in this business. And yeah, and today I provide obviously fractional marketing leadership to businesses that need more senior strategic capability, but don't necessarily or can't necessarily justify the cost of a full-time senior marketing leader.
Think it's so interesting in hindsight, and it's the reason why I start with that question, because it's so interesting how often in hindsight the things that make sense that you weren't always super aware of at the time. As you said, particularly when it's your first role or your first couple of roles, you don't actually know that that's unusual, that you're sat there, in at the leadership table with the CEO, hearing these decisions, hearing these conversations. And actually it's only in hindsight that you can kind of look back and go, oh wow, like that was really formative. Like that actually really
Yes.
changed how I approached my work as a marketer, how I, think about things. And yeah, I find that so interesting what those moments are that often only become clear in hindsight.
Yes, and I guess also, I mean, you'll probably remember all same thing as me, but back in those days, it was a lot more formal, the
Yes,
meetings were
yes.
formal,
Yeah,
the leadership
yeah,
was very different, it looked
yeah,
very different, and your expectations were different of you. So I think, yes, looking back now, you go, oh wow, that was a great experience. And I wish I had taken myself in that moment a little bit more seriously and said, oh, embrace this. You should
yeah,
feel privileged, Laura, that you sat at that table. So
yeah.
yeah,
But it's the classic, isn't it, of we don't know what we don't know.
we don't
Often
know.
in that stage, as you say, you don't know,
Correct.
any different. You used a phrase. Actually, it was only two words, but I loved it. A quiet ambition, three words. Such a lovely way to phrase that. Do you kind of think of that as, I don't know, that little voice at the back of your head that kind of said, one day you're going to do this? Is that how it kind of sounded to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've always been an ambitious person generally, and probably not so quiet about my ambitions generally. So I've always voiced my ambitions to businesses, to senior leaders, just so they're aware that I want more.
Yeah,
But I
great.
guess that having my own business was probably more quieter, if you want to call it a
Yeah,
quiet ambition,
yeah,
only because it's something that's so scary and something that, you take so much risk in doing that. And it really does, and from I started my business last September to today, I've learned so much. And if I had known all these things that I know now, I would probably have started it earlier, only because I've met so many wonderful people. The learning curve, the ability to be across so many different sectors, different type of industries, and people in different jobs. It's just amazing. Honestly, it is amazing.
tell me about that time when you're, I guess, having that sort of realization that you want more, that what you want to do isn't going to be possible within what was your current role, and maybe actually won't be possible within any organization. It actually needs to be something that you kind of need to step out on your own and do. And as you said, like, did you use the word scary? I can't remember. That might be my word.
Yeah, scary.
Don't want to put words in your mouth. But that kind of feeling of like, oh wow, like I think I'm gonna do this. Like, talk me through that. What was going through your head, and what were you feeling as you were kind of going through that process?
Yeah, I guess I must say I'll turn into a little bit of a sad story. So at the time when I was deciding on that, a general manager that I worked with, he was such a lovely man. He fell ill. So his words to me were enjoy life, Laura. And I guess that kind of pushed me even harder. And that really,
Yeah,
his legacy will probably live in with me for that reason, that it just pushed me harder and faster to make this dream a reality.
yeah,
And he only passed away early this year. But I think just the fact that he said to me, enjoy life, I think that's where I said to myself, well, I'm not going to waste my time, and I'm going to take that risk and wherever it takes me. So I think that was probably my biggest push, I must say. And yeah, and I guess I just knew, like you said, that there wasn't going to be another organization that may be able to satisfy what I want. And I've always loved creating marketing functions from scratch. I've always loved seeing a business, being at a foundation level in marketing and getting to this other level and setting them up for success and seeing that growth. I've always loved that. And I thought to myself, if I go into another business, I can do that for the next 3 years again. And then what's next? I've got to leave that business to go to
yeah,
another business
yeah,
and so forth. So it's
yeah,
like a constantly me leaving businesses to be able to get what I want out of my career. Whereas if I had my own business, I could do that easily with clients.
yeah,
So, and I don't have to leave
yeah.
businesses. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, it just kind of makes sense at a certain kind of level of seniority, and particularly you touched on the more strategic side of things, that building aspect. you reach a point in your career where that's the kind of work that you want to do. You don't necessarily day to day kind of want to be down in the weeds. It is that more influential strategic direction, growth, revenue generation, that side of things. And as you said, it's hard to get that continuously in a business. It is a
Right.
cycle in a lot of instances, and from the business's perspective as well. I think it's a very logical solution that you can have access to a level of expertise and a level of knowledge and a level of strategic thinking that you perhaps can't afford in a full-time ongoing person, and maybe don't need, for the same reason that we said before. You don't need that person for the next 3 years, but they could have a huge impact on your business over a shorter period of time.
Correct. Yeah. A 12-month period could be fine, and you set them up for
Yeah.
growth, and you potentially help them hire someone else. And then it could be on needs basis when they need it, and if they need something else, if they acquire a new business. So yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What's surprised you about it? What's something that you've
Hmm.
discovered since working for yourself that you perhaps weren't expecting? I'm sure there's more than one, but maybe the one that
So many
comes to
things.
mind first.
Oh gosh. Okay. I think accounting, that the whole, business behind the
Yeah,
scenes of having to understand your BAS and GST and, all the things, all the numbers, in a working for a business, you understand budgets and how they work and profit, revenue, and all the rest. But this is more, small type size business that's different. What also surprised me is networking and how important that is. And I wish I had done that earlier in my career. I think anyone sitting, in marketing positions right now, whether you're a junior marketing coordinator or marketing specialist or even an early marketing manager, take time and set yourself KPIs on networking. Say to yourself, this
100%.
month I'm going to meet two people for coffee and someone that I haven't met before. I wish I had done that earlier. So I think that's another
Yeah.
surprise. Mm.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a massive thing, and I think it's easy. Something I talk about almost constantly. I get that it's easy. You're busy day to day. Doesn't seem that important at that specific moment in time, and so it just kind of drops down the priority list. But I think one of the things that proactively building relationships with a wider group of people does is that it gives you options, regardless of what the future holds. And let's be honest, there's a lot of uncertainty about it at the moment. So it's absolutely one of the things that you can proactively do for yourself, for your career, to give yourself options, whatever those options might be, whether it's, wanting to find a new role, new permanent role in an organization, whether it's wanting to go out on your own and doing that upfront work. And the point that you made, which again, I always suggest to people, and it's such a good one, is to give yourself KPIs around it, because
Yeah.
if you don't, it just won't happen. Or block out whatever it is, an hour a fortnight in your calendar, and that is your time to
Yeah.
pick up the phone, reach out to a colleague, as you said, have a coffee, go to an event, whatever it is, and kind of make that promise to yourself. Because
Yeah.
if that time in your calendar was a meeting with someone else, if it was a meeting with your line manager, say, you wouldn't cancel it. But it's something that you're
Yes.
doing for yourself, for the benefit of your own career. And too often we do cancel that meeting with
Yes.
ourselves. We go, oh, I'm busy, I
Yeah.
haven't got time for that now. And what happens? It never reappears in the
It never
calendar.
happens.
It never
Yes.
happens. And then, as you said, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years later, the number of times I have heard someone say exactly what you said there, of I wish I had started doing this sooner. It would have made such a difference to me, which is one of the reasons that I bang on about it constantly and hope that it will
100%.
land.
Oh, yeah. And also ask your current people that whether it's your line manager, like you mentioned, or anyone like that, make it known that you want to network. I don't think it's a bad
Yeah,
thing,
not at
and
all.
seek introductions. Say, do you have
Yeah,
someone that you could introduce me to?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just,
The
yeah.
the other way I think of it, and I think sometimes people don't love the word because it sounds maybe a little bit transactional. It's a little bit Americanized. You know, they picture themselves in a you're drinking warm wine in a room with 100 strangers. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, and unless that's the way that you enjoy meeting new
Yeah.
people, it's not for me. So
No.
I don't do it that way. But essentially you're building a community for yourself. That's how I think of it. And like any community to that point of transactional, it's a two-way street. You're not out there just asking everyone to help you without offering anything. It's
Yes.
a two-way street. You know, you can learn from them, they can learn from you, you can help them, they can help you over a prolonged period of time. And that's not just about opportunities, that's about learning, it's about insight, it's about support. And I just think, you know, that there's so many benefits outside of the obvious ones that, yeah, I'm pleased you raised that because I think it's a really
Yeah,
important point, and
it is.
one that people say I don't think are proactive enough about. The
Yes, I
other thing
agree.
that you mentioned there that I wanted to go back to, Laura, was that, and good on you for doing this, that you identified, sounds like pretty early on when you were kind of a solo marketer in those roles, that you didn't necessarily have that mentor, or you didn't have that senior marketer that you could learn from. So you took it upon yourself to proactively go out there and find that learning. Can you talk to me about that in a bit more detail, and kind of talk me through what you did?
Sure. I think it's so important to continue your learning whilst you're at a role, and especially when, and there is a lot, still there is a lot of those businesses, medium-sized businesses, even small businesses that have sole marketer. And it could be a marketing coordinator or senior marketing coordinator, and expect you to do the strategy and expect you to do
Yeah.
the
Everything.
execution and everything in one, and
Yeah.
maybe answer a phone call at reception and whatever else, or pack some samples to a customer. And that's all great, but I think it's, how do you then, well, firstly set boundaries so you can explain to them why you'd like to do this part of the role, because this is where the business will benefit most out of in terms of your skill set. But then the second thing is, how do you then, and like myself in earlier in the career, how do you learn? Who teaches you about actual marketing technical skills? You don't have, and many times I sat on the table with managing directors saying to me, "Oh, I don't have the marketing skills you do." I know I do because I went to uni in early in my career, but uni gives you, a totally different perspective to what
Yeah.
a senior marketer would from years of experience. So I think understanding, finding mentors out there. So for me, it was I start early in career, I was doing some courses. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a kind of an additional boost. Then I did, and I still think that's still going on, the mentor walks. So I used to do a
Yes.
lot of those
Yeah.
mentor walks, and I met some lovely people through that. I think seeking those kind of opportunities for yourself is so important, because that learning curve will only help you later in life.
Yeah.
And then later on, obviously a little bit more down the track in my senior leadership roles, I started executive coaching. So again, and that's where I sort of noticed the gap. I thought it's great how there's executive coaches out there for the senior leadership. I think it's very necessary. It's changed me completely. It's given me a different outlook on leadership. Very important. But then what happens to those junior marketers? Where do they go? How do they seek that mentorship? If they have, obviously, if they're the leader from the leaders, great. If they're working in a large
Yeah.
organization, but if they don't, where do they go? So that probably is still to this day is a little bit more of a question,
Yeah.
unanswered question.
With that executive coaching, is that something that you sought out for yourself, or is that something that the business supported you on?
No, so I did look that for myself. So I started following Jack Phillips when my son was in grade one. So I remember that clearly. So that was 14 years ago, 15 years ago,
Wow.
actually 15 years ago. And she was at the time a CMO for Visa. She was
Yeah.
in a corporate role, and I don't know whether you remember, Jack Phillips, I think.
I don't know her
But
person. Well, I've met her many years ago, but yeah, I've followed her on
yeah,
LinkedIn, and actually, I think I met her. I was in recruitment at the time and I met her when she was in that role at
in
Visa.
the role. Yeah.
Mm,
So I've followed her journey and I always loved her posts. She was very active on LinkedIn even back then. And so a general manager who used to work with many years ago said to me he was doing some executive coaching and he explained to me how it works. And I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. And then not long after, it was just straight after COVID, Jack had posted that she's doing executive coaching. And I thought, what a great opportunity to have someone that has that marketing expertise and a skill set and
yeah,
has done marketing before, but
yeah.
also a leader. And we connected straight away. When I started the journey with her, it was just similar personalities, similar outlook, and I love it ever since then. So I've still got a couple of sessions left with Jack. Yeah, I think it's that continuous learning is so important. And I think one of the main things that I took away from there is self-awareness and how important it is to have that self-awareness in leadership. And Jack taught me that. I mean, credit to her. So yeah, yeah, love the journey.
The thing I particularly, and the reason I asked that question is that the thing I particularly love about that is that, again, you were proactive, like you took it upon yourself to do that
Mm,
for yourself. So often, I hear people say or, see on LinkedIn, oh, my company won't invest in development. There's no training for me. And, it's a little bit worries me. And I get it. Of course, it would be lovely if your if your employer was going to invest in you, like that would be
yeah.
great. But if they're not, like that's not the end of the story.
No,
And
no,
and to the similar point with networking and being proactive, like no one cares about your career as much as you do. So you need to
100%.
be the driving force. You need to be captain of your own ship. Driving your own bus is the other analogy I always use. I don't know why it's become about bus drivers, but anyway, the onus is on you, and
100%.
actually, even in the scenario where the organization is funding that training and development for you, the onus is still on you to
Oh,
to to be proactive in having that conversation and saying, I've identified this area that I would like to develop in. I think I could learn some more skills in this area. Is there budget? I found this course. Is there budget for me to go and do this? And if there is, awesome. But instead, if there's not, that's not the end of it. And if you're in a position to be able to pay for your own executive coach as you did, fantastic. But even if you're not, there are still so many things out there proactively that you can do for yourself that are absolutely free. It doesn't have
same.
to
Yeah,
just be. I think
yeah.
often it's easy to kind of make an excuse in that area. So great to hear that you were proactive and you did that, and that it has had such a profound impact
Impact.
on you, and it's
And I
something that's taken you over a number of years that you continue to benefit from.
and I guess I forgot to add. So to begin with, I did seek executive coaching, and because I followed her, she just sort of made sense. But at the same time, I did ask my company. So I did put a business case forward for them to
Yeah,
fund my first few sessions. And I think it was first 3 months or 6 months or something along
yeah,
that line. But, it wasn't just going to the CEO saying, I want some executive coaching. It was
yeah,
about me putting together a business
yeah,
case
of
and seeing
course.
what
Yeah,
they're going to get out of that. So I
yeah,
did put together a thorough business case and it was approved. And I must say, a good story and a good outcome out of that. I did get promoted within probably next, I believe, 12 months after doing executive
there you
coaching.
go.
So I think it did
Yeah,
work out. And with that
yeah,
promotion, it came a little bit of
exactly.
money. So,
Yeah,
and then I could
concept. Yeah,
afford more coaching.
yeah,
So proof of concept, yes. And it's all about, and in business as well, you spend money to get money, right? And it's the same
yeah.
thing in this. So, yeah, all
Yeah,
for it.
it's an interesting disconnect, and I realise it's slightly self-serving of me banging on about this, but it's the last thing I'm going to say about it. It's interesting that there's a slight disconnect, I think, sometimes between and even from people that are really ambitious and they work hard and they want to excel in their careers. There's sometimes that disconnect between, well, sometimes you have got to invest in yourself. You might invest in yourself in other areas, but in that sort of development, training, coaching, whatever word you want to use, yeah, there is sometimes that disconnect between investing in it for yourself. But I shall stop banging on about that now.
I agree.
The other thing that you touched on, Laura, that I wanted to come back to, because it is a little bit of a soapbox topic for me, was for more junior marketers or marketers that are earlier in their career, if they are solo marketers in an organization, and where is that kind of mentoring leadership coming from? I think the other side of that conversation that I was interested to get into, because it's something I don't necessarily see highlighted a lot, is that that's also part of the kind of working from home broader conversation. I'm going to put a couple of caveats in here because it's a topic that I feel quite passionate about. So I'm gonna put a few caveats in before I dive in. Firstly, of course, flexibility is important. I'm not suggesting that flexibility isn't important. I'm not suggesting that we should all be chained to our desks, 5 days a week from 9 till 5. That's one caveat. The other caveat is it's perhaps could seem slightly hypocritical because I work from home, but I also work for
Yes.
myself and it is just me. So
Yes.
I kind of have the final say over that. So having got my two caveats out of the way, it does seem to me, and obviously interested in your take on this, that whilst the pendulum needed to swing, in my opinion, it has swung wildly too far the other way. And I think one of the impacts of that as I say, I don't see necessarily getting a lot of airplay is the level of informal on the job coaching and learning that more junior team members get without perhaps even realizing that it's happening. It's listening to a conversation, it's observing a meeting, an interaction, all of those things that you can't do remotely, that you don't see on Teams. And I reflect back in my own career to how much I learned from actually listening and watching other people. And if I didn't have that and had no other real avenue to gain that, I think there'd be a real hole in my development more broadly. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Emma. And I think you and I come from that era of full-time in the office, very
Yep,
rigid ways,
yep,
disciplined, duh, duh, duh.
yep,
And so this change has brought the flexibility, and flexibility can look different. Is it working from home? Is it working in cafes? Is it working overseas? Is it working on a holiday?
yeah, yeah,
Flexibility can look very different
yeah, true.
when we talk about flexibility. So generally, I'm actually pretty supportive of flexibility. I think, working from home, it's progressive, it enables balance, it reflects of how modern work has evolved. And I think that shift will keep evolving to a degree. But like everything in life, I think there needs to be some sort of balance. We talk
Yeah,
about balance when we talk about diets, we talk about balance in any form of life. So
yeah,
I think work also needs a balance. I think early in my career, being present in the office had a huge benefit for me personally. I
yeah,
learned how to manage personalities, you
yeah,
know, and I mean, that's huge. There's so many
it
people in
is.
the office. If you work for a large corporate, there's going to be even more. So how do you
Yeah,
learn to manage good and bad personalities and,
yeah,
and whatever
yeah,
else in between? How do you
yeah,
read a room? I mean, here we are talking online. I can read you, but there isn't that personal body language that I can read from the online meeting. How do you recover from a difficult presentation? If you present
yeah,
online, it's totally different to how you present in a room full of, say, like I said, 10 executives. How do you build that influence informally as well if you're always online? And I think there's something powerful about that incidental learning as well. Something
absolutely.
that you're in the office and you overhear a strategic conversation, or as a marketer, you overhear salespeople talking about the product, and you go, oh, and it happened to me so many times. Oh,
Yeah,
I want to put that in the brochure next time. Being invited into those meetings that are maybe slightly above your level gives you an opportunity, gives you
yeah,
an open door. Giving that kind of feedback immediately after a discussion, not dwelling on things, not thinking. It's just there's a lot of benefits, I think, that you can't replicate that remotely. And I don't think the answer is completely abandoning the flexibility, because I'm all
no,
for it.
no, not at all.
but it's about being intentional. And I
Yeah.
think you've got to, if your teams say, if your team is hybrid, great, because you've got an office as a secondary source. But there is companies in today's world that are remote. Well, then how do you intentionally create those spaces, co-working spaces where you can meet up together, where you can, a strategy, when you put together a strategy in a room with a whiteboard and a team
Yeah.
around you, wow, so
Completely different. Yeah.
completely different to sitting in a room by yourself. And I mean, I'm seeing that myself now. I'm sitting by
Yeah.
myself creating a strategy
Yeah.
with no one to tell me whether I'm doing a good job or not. So
Yeah.
it's just, I think there is a lot to say when it comes to office work. And, even like, I remember those drinks on Friday night.
Yeah. Yeah.
How good was that?
Yeah.
Don't forget that
Yeah.
that after work socialization that I think if you're not in the office, you don't get that. And then you're meeting new people. That's
Yeah.
just,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's my opinion. I think, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I said at the start, I think it was a solution to a very specific problem. And to
Yes.
your point, as I said, flexibility is important. I agree that the pendulum needed to swing. I just think it's gone wildly too far the other
Mm.
way, and I think we've lost sight of, as you said there, a lot of the benefits of, it's just become, oh, the time I spend on a commute, or, the negative aspects. Sure, if, commuting's not particularly fun, no one's suggesting it is. But there's also lots of other, there are benefits of actually being in the office. And as you said, even just the kind of the social side, like how many of people's friendship groups have come from work? Like how many of your
So
close friends are people that you met at
worked with.
work? How many relationships started because the people worked together? Like it's, you spend so much time there. The social aspects, I think, is huge. And as I said, that sort of, you called it incidental learning, which I really liked. I just think we haven't really got our heads around that yet. And I have a concern that we're kind of going to get 5, 10 years down the road and go, oh wow, okay, we didn't actually fully appreciate what we've lost there. And to the earlier point about when you were in some of your first roles, and you were at that leadership table, and you didn't know that that was unusual because you don't know what you don't know. And if you've never had that, it's not that you're perhaps going, oh, I'm missing out on all this really important mentoring, learning, training, because you don't know any different. You don't know you're missing out on it because you've never had it. And to your other point about, some of the, I don't call them soft skills, but it just seems like such a dismissive dismissive phrase
So
for something
important.
that's so important.
Oh,
Learning to
yes.
deal with challenging personalities, learning to work with people that you don't like or get on with, learning to have difficult
Yeah.
conversations, all of these things are really hard, and it's a very small minority of people who are innately good at those things. Like most of us
Yes.
have got
I
better at
agree.
those things by learning, observing,
Yeah.
practicing, getting feedback, blah blah blah. And yeah, it does concern me that there's a hole there that I don't think we've fully kind of appreciated
It
what the
does.
future of that's going to look like. Yeah.
And I guess it's how does then, a lot of businesses out there now are trying to get people back in the office, but how do you then encourage them to go back in the office by offering and providing them benefits? And I'm not talking about, gym membership and,
Yeah.
and a lunch here and there or a coffee. It's about providing them with the benefits that I just mentioned earlier, that
Yeah.
incidental learning, explaining to them what they're going to get out of that. Maybe inviting them to that senior leadership meeting just to see
Mm.
how that works, and
Yeah.
so I think it's rather than creating mandates, because we've seen all how mandates don't work well during COVID, right? So it's rather, and I've never been the one, you got to do this, and I almost rebel against it when there's
Yeah.
someone tells me you have
Yeah, I
to
know.
do this. I'm like,
Why?
oh no, I'm not. So it's
Yeah.
like, how do we then create not a mandate, but rather create a benefit to these people so that they
Yeah.
do get back to, they can get them through the door. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just how
Yeah.
do we
And
reframe that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it's not a simple thing. It's a complex
No.
thing. I don't think there are
No.
any easy solutions. And I think also it's nuanced. So, it
Mm.
can't just be a black and white thing. There's going to be exceptions. There's so many different
Yeah.
parts to it. But the thing that does make me smile sometimes is, the people that are very firmly on the flexibility bandwagon, they'll wave the flag of flexibility, are often the most inflexible, rigid people when it comes to
Yes.
how they're interpreting flexibility.
Yes.
Flexibility actually doesn't mean flexibility. It means I will never go into the office on a Monday or a Friday or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, as I say,
Yeah.
I think we've lost the plot slightly on kind of some of the framing, how we're talking about it, and how we're thinking about it, and actually thinking about the benefits, not just the fact that, yeah, you've got to get to the office and all of that kind of thing. And then, on your mandates point again, I think it's a complex conversation, because I think
Mm.
what can happen, that is, if there aren't some mandates in place, or at least
Mm.
agreed days, then I go into the office and no one else in the team is there. So I'm there for team catch up,
By
and, to
myself.
get the
Yeah.
vibe,
I get
and
that.
then I'm sat on a Zoom with people at home, and then I think, well, what's the point? And then I
Point.
don't
Yeah.
and then I don't go on the next day. So, as I said,
It's
it's not simple, and
difficult.
I'm
It's very
yeah, and
difficult.
I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting I've, got all the answers. And as I say, I work for myself from home, and it's just me. So it's very
Yeah.
easy
Yeah.
for me to
So
kind
do
of,
I. Yeah. But sometimes I miss that. I must say, I miss that a lot. There's a marketing professional that I know in the industry that's currently getting us all together, marketers, into co-working spaces just so we
Is
can
that
share
Anna?
ideas. And I thought, no, not Anna, Nicola Clement.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Anna's doing the
Yeah, I
same
think
thing.
she's a retailer. Yeah.
Yeah, such an
And did Anna
idea.
say the same thing? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Great
Yeah,
idea.
she's
Love
it
it.
is. Yeah, and I think, to the earlier point about working for yourself, like everything, there's pros and cons, and I think that is one of the more challenging things, when you're used to being part of a team, and you're used to having, people around to bounce ideas off, and, get energy from and give energy to, and
Yes.
and suddenly it's just you. That is a transition, and I think that there are things like that, and there is, I think a growing kind of community of people who are now starting their own businesses, working for themselves, who are craving that, and are kind of saying, we
Yes.
want some
Yeah.
of that connection back, like, let's be that for
Mm.
each other, which I think is lovely. I think it's really
Yeah, I
nice to
love it.
see.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
One
So
of
I'm always looking for ways to get out of the house.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, go and be around people.
I'm the
When
opposite.
yeah, when you work with clients, do you go to client site? Do you spend time on their site, or are you typically working remotely, or does it depend?
I try to do, whenever I'm talking to a new client, I always, and any clients really, I try to encourage myself to go into their
Yeah.
offices. And some really appreciate that. And then
Mm.
there's some that just, are happy online, and that's
Yeah.
okay. So I sort
Yeah,
of work with what they like. So I've got one
of
client
course.
currently that I have never met in face to face, but it just happened to be that way, and it's okay. But I do have another client who I went for our first meeting. I went to their office, and he said to me, wow, I'm really impressed by you. And I said, why? And he said, you actually, you had a choice. His
Yeah.
executive assistant asked me, do you want to come to the office, or do you want to do it online? And I
Mm.
preferred to go to the office. And he said, I'm so impressed with the fact that you came to my office, and it was
Mm.
like an hour drive for me, so not
Yeah.
close, on the other side of the city, because he said, I love that human interaction. He said, I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you did that. And I said, it's so important when I meet my
I
first
agree.
first client, first time. I like that face to face.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So
I think it
yeah.
does send a message as well, even, even in today's climate, and often with my own clients, or questions that get asked on LinkedIn, people will say, "Oh, if I'm given the option for interview, should I choose in person?" And I'm like, Yes.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
100%.
For as
Yes.
much for your own benefit as theirs, because you get
100%.
to see the space, you get to, for want of a less, formal term, you get to feel the vibe, you get to meet the person
Yeah.
in person. So important. I
And
think
it's so
anything like
important.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And back in the days when the interviews were always in the office, you know how
Yeah.
many times I've turned up to the office and I thought this was a great job, great role, amazing. And I get into the office and I look at the culture there and the vibe and I'm like,
Yeah,
no,
you can
thank
feel it
you.
sometimes. Yeah,
You can
I've done
feel
that
it.
too as well. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
very clearly going through an interview process, and it was the classic perfect job on paper. And every logical point was going, you should be falling over yourself for this.
Mm.
But there was just something, an energy in the office that I couldn't tell you what it was. I couldn't describe it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt it, and I was just like, this isn't the right place for me. And you are never going to get that on Teams, Zoom,
No.
whatever.
No.
There's something to be said for the old school
Ah,
in
yes, I think
person.
so. I agree.
Final question, Laura, and it's always the final question here, and that is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
I'm gonna say panic slowly. And that's actually a quote from my executive coach, from Jack Phillips. And that stuck with me for a long time because when something goes wrong in life or especially in business, and our instinct is always to react quickly and we just rush to fix it. So we operate with urgency, and I think Jack really taught me panic slowly, Laura. So learning how to pause, how to assess the situation, how to respond calmly under pressure, it's such a valuable leadership skill, but it also
Yeah.
gives you an ability to make clear decisions, and probably that decision will be the right one at the end. So yeah, I wish I had known that earlier.
That's a good one. And certainly, as you said, from that outward leadership perspective, 100%, but also probably from your own internal
Oh yeah.
nervous system, that you're not like giving yourself that
Yes, you're
spike
not
of like, that
stressed.
you're just like,
Yes.
okay, take a breath. As you said, you're going to make a
Zen.
much better, yeah, you're going to make a much better, more logical, more thought through decision. And of course, the impact on your team here. Panic slowly. Good one. Thanks, Jack. Well, I like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you so much for joining me, Laura. I've really enjoyed the conversation and loved hearing your take on things. And good on you for taking the leap and going forward with your business. And yeah, great to hear that it's all going well, and may it continue to do so for you.
Thanks for having me, Emma. It was a lovely conversation.